The sun was setting behind the mountains when David Park heard the sound. It was like thunder, but wrong. Too close. Too heavy. The ground shook beneath his feet as he stood on the porch of his small farmhouse. David was 62 years old. He had gray hair and tired eyes. For 30 years, he had served as a combat medic in the colonial military. He had seen men die. He had held their hands as they took their last breath. He had saved hundreds, but he remembered only the ones he lost. Now he lived alone on this quiet world called Haven 7. He grew wheat. He fixed old machines. He tried to forget the wars. But war had found him again. The shadow came from the east. It blocked out the dying sunlight like a storm cloud with wings. David's heart stopped when he saw what it was. A greater drake. The creature was massive, 40 feet long from nose to tail. Its scales were black like coal, but they shined like metal in the fading light. Its wings stretched wide enough to cover his entire farm. Its eyes were golden and ancient, and filled with something David could not understand. Every human on Haven 7 knew about drakes. They were the enemy. The monsters. For 50 years, humans and drakes had been at war. The colonial authority said drakes were mindless beasts who attacked without reason. Thousands of settlers had died in their claws. David had never seen one this close. He had never wanted to. His hand moved toward the emergency beacon on his belt. One press and colonial rangers would come. They would bring guns and bombs. They would kill this creature. But something made him stop. The drake was not attacking. It landed in his wheat field with strange gentleness, crushing only a small circle of crops. Its massive body lowered to the ground slowly, carefully. And then it did something that David would remember for the rest of his life. It placed something at the edge of his porch. David looked down. His breath caught in his throat. It was a baby drake. A hatchling. It was small, no bigger than a house cat. Its scales were dark gray, not yet turned to the deep black of adulthood. And it was hurt. Badly hurt. The little creature's wing was torn apart. Burn marks covered its small body. David recognized those wounds. He had seen them many times before. Plasma burns. Colonial defense turrets. Someone had shot this baby. The mother drake made a sound. It was low and deep, like a moan from the bottom of the ocean. David looked up at her face. Her golden eyes were fixed on him. And in those eyes, he saw something he never expected to see in a monster. He saw a mother begging for her child's life. David's earpiece crackled. His neighbor Lisa Kim was watching through her security drone. She was a xenobiologist who studied alien life. Her voice was high and scared. David, get inside right now. I'm calling the Rangers. Wait, David said. Are you crazy? That thing will kill you. She's not attacking, Lisa. Look at her. It's a trick. They're animals. They don't think. They just kill. David looked at the mother drake again. She had not moved. She had not opened her mouth to show her teeth. She had not raised her claws. She just waited and watched and hoped. She brought me her baby, David said quietly. Her baby. She brought it to a human. David, please. Why would she do that, Lisa? If drakes are just monsters, why would she do that? Lisa did not answer. David made his choice. He bent down and carefully picked up the hatchling. It was warm in his hands. Its small heart was beating fast, like a frightened bird. It made a tiny sound, weak and full of pain. The mother drake watched. She did not attack. She did not move. She just watched her child in the hands of her enemy. David carried the hatchling inside his house. He worked through the night. His medical training was for humans, not aliens. He did not know drake biology. He did not know what medicines would help or hurt, but he had 30 years of experience keeping broken bodies alive against all odds. The hatchling's wounds were bad. The plasma burns had gone deep. The wing was almost destroyed. Any normal doctor would have said it was hopeless. But David Park was not a normal doctor. He was a man who had refused to let soldiers die on battlefields across a dozen worlds. He was stubborn. He was skilled. And tonight, he was going to save this little creature or die trying. He cleaned the wounds. He used medicines meant for human burns, adjusting the doses carefully. He stitched the torn wing with the finest thread he had. His hands were steady, even though his heart was racing. Outside, the mother drake did not leave. She coiled her massive body around the farmhouse like a living wall. Her eyes stayed fixed on the window where she could see her child. Lisa arrived before sunrise. She had deleted all the drone footage. That was a crime that could send her to prison for 20 years. But she had done it anyway. She walked into David's house with anger in her eyes. "Do you understand what you've done?" she demanded. "If anyone finds out, they'll execute you. Harboring drakes is treason against humanity." David was sitting beside the hatchling. The small creature was sleeping now, its breathing slow but steady. It had survived the night. "Look at her, Lisa," David said. He was exhausted. His hands were covered in strange dark blood. But there was something new in his tired eyes. Something that looked almost like peace. "I spent 30 years killing. Saving people so they could go back to killing. Patching up soldiers so they could make more orphans." He looked at the sleeping hatchling. "Maybe it's time I tried something different." Lisa wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him he was a fool, that he was throwing his life away for a beast. But then she looked outside. The mother drake was still there, waiting, hoping. A mother who had trusted her greatest enemy with her child's life. Lisa sat down heavily. "Tell me what you need," she said quietly. Outside, the sun rose over the mountains. A new day was beginning, and something had changed in the universe. A human had chosen mercy. Now they would all have to live with what came next. 3 days passed. The hatchling did not die. David named her Ember because of the way her gray scales seemed to glow orange when the morning light touched them. She was still weak. She could not walk without falling. Her damaged wing hung limp at her side. But she was alive, and she was starting to trust him. On the first day, Ember had been terrified. She hissed at David whenever he came close. She tried to bite his hands when he changed her bandages. She was a wild creature, scared and hurt, and she saw him as a threat. But David was patient. He had learned patience in field hospitals, with soldiers who screamed and fought because they were afraid. He spoke to Ember in a soft voice. He moved slowly. He brought her food and water and asked for nothing in return. By the third day, Ember stopped hissing. When David sat beside her, she watched him with curious eyes. When he changed her bandages, she stayed still. And when he offered her a piece of cooked meat, she took it from his hand gently. Lisa watched all of this with growing amazement. She was a scientist. She had studied alien creatures on 7 different worlds. She had written papers about animal behavior and intelligence. And everything she was seeing with Ember went against everything she knew. "This isn't possible," she said one evening, watching as Ember made small chirping sounds at David. "She's communicating with you." "Animals communicate," David said. He was tired, but calm. He had barely slept in 3 days. "Not like this. These patterns, they're too complex, too structured." Lisa pulled up her scanning equipment. "I've been recording her vocalizations. Look at this." She showed David a screen full of waves and numbers. David did not understand most of it, but he saw that the patterns repeated. They had rhythm. They had structure. It's like language, Lisa said quietly. Not just sounds. Actual language. David looked at Ember. The small creature looked back at him with golden eyes so much like her mother's. Are you trying to talk to me? He asked. Ember chirped 3 times. Then she made a longer sound, almost like a sentence. She answered you, Lisa said. Her voice was shaking. David, she answered you. Outside, the mother drake, who David had started calling Ashara in his mind, raised her head. She had heard her daughter's voice. She made a deep rumbling sound in response. Mother and child, talking to each other. Talking across the walls of a human house. We've been wrong, Lisa said. For 50 years, we've been wrong. She spent the next 2 days going through old colonial records. She hacked into databases that she was not supposed to access. She read files that were marked classified. And what she found made her sick. The first colonists, she told David on the 5th night. Ember was sleeping in a small bed David had made for her. They landed on Haven 7 62 years ago. The drakes didn't attack them. What? The drakes came to watch them. That's what the original reports say. They were curious. They watched the humans build their first settlement. They didn't hurt anyone. Then why did the war start? Lisa's face was pale. The mining company. There was valuable ore under the northern mountains. But there was also a drake nesting ground there. Hundreds of eggs. Maybe thousands. David felt cold. What did they do? They burned it. The company brought in military ships and burned the nesting ground to ash. They killed thousands of unborn drakes and dozens of mothers who tried to protect them. Silence filled the room. The drake attacks started the next day, Lisa continued. The company told everyone that the drakes attacked first. That they were mindless monsters who wanted to destroy humanity. They used the attacks to get more funding, more weapons, more soldiers. 50 years of war, David said. His voice was hollow. Built on a lie. Built on a massacre. Ember stirred in her sleep. She made small sounds, like a human child having a bad dream. David reached over and touched her gently. She calmed down. How many have we killed? David asked. I don't know. The records don't count drake deaths. They're listed as pest elimination. David thought about all the years he had served. All the soldiers he had saved. All the drake hunting missions he had supported. He had believed he was protecting humanity from monsters. Instead, he had been part of a genocide. We have to tell people, he said. If we do, they'll silence us. The companies that profit from drake hunting won't let this information spread. Then we find another way. Lisa looked at him. You really think we can change anything? 2 people against the entire colonial system? David looked at Ember. The small drake had opened her eyes. She was watching him, trusting him. Then he looked out the window at Ashara. The mother drake had not left in 5 days. She had not eaten. She had not slept. She had simply waited, watching over her child with a patience that humans called impossible for a beast. She trusted me, David said. A monster, according to everything we believe. A mindless beast. But she brought her dying child to a human because she believed I might help. He turned back to Lisa. If she can have that much faith in us, maybe we should have a little faith in ourselves. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right, she said. Let's change the world. Outside, Ashara lowered her great head. Her golden eye looked through the window at her daughter. Safe and healing in a human house. For the first time in 50 years. A drake closed her eyes and slept near human walls. Something new was being born. Something that had no name yet. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just the first step on a very long road. 2 weeks had passed since Ashara brought her wounded child to David's door. Ember was healing faster than David had dared to hope. She could walk now. She could run. Her damaged wing was still weak, but Lisa said it might heal completely with time. More importantly, David and Ember had learned to understand each other. It started with simple things. Ember would chirp twice when she was hungry. She would make a low rumbling sound when she was tired. She would press her head against David's hand when she wanted attention, but soon it became more complex. David began to recognize patterns in her sounds. Ember was not just making noise. She was trying to speak to him. Lisa built a simple translation device. It was not perfect, but it could match some of Ember's sounds to meanings. The first word it translated made David's heart stop. Father. Ember had called him father. David sat down heavily. He was a man who had never married. He had never had children. He had thought he would die alone on this quiet farm. Now a small dragon was looking at him with golden eyes full of love, calling him father. She's imprinted on you, Lisa said gently. You saved her life. You're the first thing she remembers feeling safe with. I'm not her father. Tell that to her. Ember climbed into David's lap. She was getting bigger now, almost the size of a medium dog. Her scales were warm against his skin. She made a sound that the device translated as safe. Home. David put his arms around her. He did not know what else to do. Outside, Ashara watched. She did not seem angry that her daughter loved this human. Instead, she seemed grateful, relieved. Her child was alive and happy. That was enough. Over the following days, David tried to communicate with Ashara. It was harder than talking to Ember. Ashara's sounds were deeper and more complex. But slowly, with Lisa's help, they began to understand each other. Ashara's first message was simple. She touched her head to the ground near David's feet and made a long, low sound. Thank you. Thank you for my child. You're welcome, David said. He felt strange talking to a creature that could swallow him whole. Why did you bring her to me? Why trust a human? Ashara's answer came in pieces. The translation device struggled with her complex language, but the meaning was clear. Long ago, before the fire, drakes and humans talked. Humans were curious, small but clever. Drakes watched them build homes, plant seeds, make tools. Drakes thought humans were young brothers. New family. Then the fire came. David felt the weight of those words. Fire. The massacre of the nesting ground. The beginning of everything terrible. After fire, drakes fought. Drakes killed. Drakes taught their children to fear humans, hate humans. But Ashara was old. Ashara remembered the time before. Ashara remembered humans who smiled at drakes, who waved, who did not run away. When my child was dying, Ashara continued, I looked for a human who might remember. A human who might choose differently. How did you find me? David asked. I watched. For many seasons, I watched humans in this valley. Most are loud. Most carry weapons. Most smell of fear and anger. But you are quiet. You grow food instead of destroying. You walk slowly and look at the sky. You do not smell like war. David thought about his years of violence. All the blood on his hands. He did not feel like a peaceful man. I was a soldier, he said. I hurt many of your people. I know. I smell the old violence in you. But I also smell the sadness, the tiredness, the wish for something different. That is why I chose you, a soldier who was tired of war, a mother who remembered peace, and between them, a small creature who knew nothing of hatred. This was how change began. But change never comes easy. Tommy, Lee arrived on a routine inspection 3 days later. He was young, only 25, with bright eyes and a colonial ranger uniform. He had joined the Rangers to protect people, to be a hero. He believed in his mission. When he saw Ashara coiled around David's farm, he drew his weapon. Sir, step away from the house, Tommy said. His voice was steady but scared. I'm calling for backup. Wait, David said. He stepped onto the porch. Please, just wait. There's a drake right there. A greater drake. Do you understand how dangerous that is? She's not dangerous. She's a mother. Tommy stared at him. A mother? Sir, drakes are monsters. They've killed thousands of people. We killed their children first. That stopped Tommy cold. What are you talking about? Before David could answer, Ashara moved. Tommy raised his weapon, ready to fire. But Ashara did not attack. She lowered her massive head and placed it on the ground at Tommy's feet. Her golden eyes looked up at him. Then she spoke. The translation device caught her words and played them through the speaker. Young human, I will not hurt you. I come in peace. Please do not take my daughter again. Tommy's weapon shook. It talks. Her name is Ashara, David said. And yes, she talks. They all do. We just never listened. The young ranger looked at the massive drake at his feet. He looked at David standing calmly on the porch. He looked at Ember, who had come to the window to watch. Everything he believed was falling apart. I don't understand, Tommy said quietly. I know, David said. I didn't either. But if you give me a chance, I can show you the truth. Tommy looked at Ashara one more time. The creature that should have been his enemy was lying peacefully at his feet, asking him not to hurt her child. He lowered his weapon. Okay, he said. Show me. The truth was hard to hear. But Tommy listened. And when he was done, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he stood up and walked outside to where Ashara waited. I'm sorry, he said to her. I didn't know. Ashara raised her head. She looked at the young human who had chosen to learn instead of kill. Forgiveness, she said, begins with truth. For the first time in 50 years, a colonial ranger and a greater drake stood together in peace. The world was about to change. The secret did not stay secret for long. Someone in the colonial authority had noticed Tommy Lee's strange behavior. He had stopped reporting. He had stopped checking in. He had requested leave from his duties without explanation. Governor Michael Cho sent investigators. They came back with impossible news. A retired medic was harboring drakes. A mother and her hatchling. A colonial ranger had joined them. And they were saying things. Dangerous things. Things about massacres and lies and 50 years of false war. Governor Cho was a practical man. He had been in politics for 30 years. He knew how to handle problems. Send a military unit, he ordered. Clean it up. No witnesses. No survivors. But he was too slow. Lisa had been busy. She had sent her evidence to journalists on Earth. She had shared the files with independent news agencies. She had broadcast the truth to anyone who would listen. And some people had listened. When the military convoy arrived at New Haven, they found something unexpected. 200 settlers had gathered at David's farm. Men, women, children, farmers and teachers and shopkeepers. They stood in a circle around the farmhouse, blocking the soldiers from getting close. Commander Rachel Song led the military force. She was 40 years old, a career soldier with a perfect record. She had fought drakes. She had killed them. She had believed she was protecting humanity. Now she stood before a crowd of civilians who refused to move. Step aside, she ordered through her speakers. This is official colonial authority business. No one moved. An old woman at the front of the crowd spoke up. Her name was Mary Taylor. She had lived on Haven 7 for 40 years. She had lost her husband to a drake attack 20 years ago. We've seen the evidence, Mary said. We know what really happened. We're not letting you kill these creatures. They're monsters, Commander Song said. They've killed our people. We killed their children first, Mary shouted. We started this war. We built it on murder. And we've been lying to ourselves for 50 years. Commander Song looked at her soldiers. They were young, most of them. They had been trained to fight drakes. But they had not been trained to fight their own people. "Commander," one of her sergeants said quietly, "maybe we should wait. Talk to headquarters. This is complicated." Before Song could answer, the sky darkened. They came from every direction. Greater drakes, 12 of them, descending from the clouds like thunderstorms with wings. Each one was as large as a Shara. Some were larger. They landed around the farm, surrounding the military convoy. The soldiers raised their weapons. The settlers screamed, but the drakes did not attack. They landed and they waited. Their massive eyes watched the humans. Some of them rumbled deep in their throats, sounds that David now recognized as communication. They were talking to each other, coordinating. Ashara had called her family. David walked out of his house. Ember was at his side, fully healed now, her gray scales shining in the afternoon light. She was no longer a tiny hatchling. She was growing strong. "Commander Song," David said. His voice was calm. "I served 30 years in the colonial military. Medical corps. I've seen a lot of death. I've caused a lot of death. And I'm tired." He gestured at the drakes surrounding them. "These creatures could kill us all. Every human here, dead in minutes. You know that. I know that. They know that." He paused. "But they're not attacking. Do you know why?" Commander Song did not answer. "Because they're not monsters," David continued. "They never were. They're people. Mothers and fathers. Sons and daughters. They have language. They have memories. They have feelings." He pointed at Ember. "This little one calls me father. Because I saved her life. Because I showed her that humans can be kind." He looked directly at Commander Song. "What do you want to show them today, Commander? What lesson do you want to teach?" Silence fell over the valley. 200 humans. 12 greater drakes. 50 soldiers with weapons raised. And one old medic with a small dragon at his side. Commander Song thought about her orders. Kill them all. Clean it up. No witnesses. She thought about her career. 30 years of service. Perfect record. Everything she had worked for. She thought about the drakes. Monsters, she had been taught. Mindless beasts who killed without reason. But monsters did not bring their children to humans for healing. Monsters did not come to protect without attacking. Monsters did not wait peacefully while surrounded by enemies. Maybe everything she believed was wrong. "Commander," Song lowered her weapon. "Stand down," she ordered her soldiers. Everyone stand down. A whisper ran through the crowd. Some soldiers looked relieved. Others looked confused. But they obeyed. Governor Cho's voice crackled through Song's communicator. "Commander, what are you doing?" "I ordered you to." Song turned off her communicator. She walked forward, past her soldiers, past the settlers, until she stood before Ashara. The great drake towered over her, massive and ancient and powerful. "I've killed your kind," Song said. "For 20 years, I've killed your kind." Ashara's golden eyes looked down at her. The translation device at David's belt caught her response. "Yes, and my kind has killed yours. We have both lost much. The question is, do we lose more or do we stop?" Commander Song felt something she had not felt in years. Tears running down her face. "How do we stop?" she asked. "After everything we've done to each other, how do we stop?" Ashara lowered her massive head until it was level with Song's face. "We begin," she said, "with one moment. One choice. One person who decides the killing ends here." She touched her nose gently to Song's forehead. "You have made that choice. It is enough." The soldiers watched their commander stand with a drake. The settlers watched history being rewritten. The Drakes watched and waited and hoped. And somewhere far away, Governor Cho screamed into a dead communicator, knowing that his world was about to change. The storm had passed. Now came the hard part, building something new from the ruins of the old. 6 months had passed since the day the soldiers came to New Haven. The world had changed. Not quickly, not easily, but it had changed. Governor Cho was gone. The evidence against him was too strong. The massacre of the Drake nesting ground, buried for 60 years, was now public knowledge. The lies that had fueled 50 years of war were exposed for everyone to see. Some people refused to believe it. They had lost family to Drake attacks. They had spent their lives hating the creatures. Admitting that humans had struck first, that the war was built on murder, was too painful. But many people listened. Many people looked at the evidence and felt the same sickness that David had felt. They asked themselves hard questions. They demanded answers. And slowly, piece by piece, things began to change. The first Human Drake Summit was held on a warm spring day. It happened at New Haven, in the wheat fields where Ashara had first landed. 20 Drake elders came, led by Ashara. 20 human representatives came, led by Commander Song, who had traded her military uniform for simple civilian clothes. David stood at the center, translating. The devices had gotten better, but there was still much that required a human touch. And the Drakes trusted David. He was the bridge between two worlds. The summit lasted 3 days. There was anger. There were tears. Drakes spoke of nesting grounds destroyed, children burned, families torn apart. Humans spoke of settlers killed, farms destroyed, lives lived in constant fear. Both sides had suffered. Both sides had sinned. There was no innocent party in this war, but there was a future. That was what they decided in the end. Whatever had happened before, they could choose something different for what came next. The first agreement was simple. A ceasefire. No more hunting. No more attacks. Both sides would keep to their territories, while longer negotiations continued. It was not peace. Not yet, but it was a start. David watched from his porch as the Drake elders flew away. Ashara stayed behind. She had become a permanent guest at New Haven, sleeping in the fields near David's farm. The settlers had grown used to her. Children would run up to touch her scales. Farmers would share their lunch near her resting spot. Fear was fading. Understanding was growing. Ember had grown much in 6 months. She was the size of a large horse now, her gray scales deepening toward black. Her wing had healed completely. She could fly short distances. Though she still preferred to walk beside David, she still called him father. David had stopped feeling strange about it. He was 62 years old. He had never expected to have children, but life had given him a daughter anyway. Just not the kind he had imagined. Lisa came to visit that evening. She had become famous. Her research on Drake intelligence had been published across every human world. Scientists were coming to Haven 7 to study the Drakes, to learn their language, to understand their culture. "You look tired," she said, sitting beside David on the porch. "I'm always tired," David said. "Too old for this much excitement. You could rest now, you know? You've done enough. Others can carry the work forward." David looked out at his wheat field. Ashara was sleeping there, her massive body curled among the golden stalks. Ember was beside her, daughter and mother reunited. A year ago, this scene would have been impossible. A nightmare. Now it was just home. "I think I will rest," David said. "But not too much. There's still work to do." Lisa smiled. "There always is." Tommy came by the next day. The young ranger had resigned from the colonial authority. He was helping to train a new kind of force now. Peacekeepers, they called themselves. Humans who would work alongside drakes instead of fighting them. We had another incident yesterday, Tommy reported. Some hunters tried to kill a young drake near the southern mountains. What happened? The local settlers stopped them, held them until we arrived. The drake flew away safely. David nodded slowly. A year ago, those settlers would have helped the hunters. Things are different now. People are different. Not all of them, David knew. There were still those who hated. Still those who wanted war. Still those who could not accept that the creatures they had feared all. Their lives were not monsters, but enough people had changed. Enough hearts had opened. And that was all you could ask for. That night, David walked into the field where Ashara lay. The great drake opened one golden eye as he approached. "I've been thinking," David said. He sat down against her warm scales. Ember came over and curled up beside him, her head in his lap. "About why you chose me," Ashara rumbled softly. She did not need the translator anymore for simple conversations. They had learned to understand each other in other ways. "You said you saw someone who might choose differently. Someone tired of war." David stroked Ember's scales. "But I think it was more than that. I think you saw someone who needed saving too." Ashara was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice deep and ancient. "Yes. I saw a man who had lost himself. A warrior with no more will to fight. A healer with no one to heal. I thought, if I give him someone to save, perhaps he will find his way back." David felt tears in his eyes. "You didn't just need me to save Ember. No, I needed you to save yourself." He leaned against her warm scales and cried. For the first time in 30 years, he let himself cry. For all the soldiers he had lost. For all the violence he had witnessed. For all the years he had spent running from himself. Ember made soft sounds and pressed closer to him. Ashara curved her great neck around, sheltering them both. A wounded healer. A desperate mother. A dying child. And from this broken beginning, a new world was growing. David looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were spreading across the galaxy. They were meeting new species, finding new worlds, building new futures. They would make mistakes. They would hurt and be hurt. They would fear what they did not understand. But they would also learn. They would also grow. They would also find the courage to be better, because that was what humans did. In the end, when everything seemed lost, they found a way. They chose hope over hate. They chose love over fear. They chose tomorrow over yesterday. David Park had defied fate. Not through strength or cleverness or luck. He had simply done what humans do best. He had chosen, and that had made all the difference. The end.